afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us again for another webinar as part of the Solidarity series conversations during lockdown. And so today we have a topic on vulnerability. It is titled Problematizing Vulnerability, Unpacking Intersectionality During a Disaster. As we all know now, the coronavirus has shown that it truly does not see religion, caste, class, race, ethnicity, nationality, or age, or gender, or color, or language, or dress, or sexual orientation. But in a country like ours, where there exist multiple forms of discrimination and oppression, there is surely an opportunity that this virus may impact certain sections of our population very disproportionately. And social inequality has existed much before the virus took birth. And this can have, and it can foster a very lopsided impact. So social exclusions obstruct both access to resource, and it also kind of, does not give options to move out of the vulnerability. So many of the forms of domination and exclusion will intensify at this time and also post-disaster vulnerability. And in the days and weeks to come, it will become increasingly clear that much of these will have a role in determining who will have access to healthcare, who will not, who will eventually live and who won't, and who will make those decisions, and who will get rehabilitated and who won't. Because discrimination and oppression begin very early, and it operates at almost all levels of our societies, from very subtle to very extremely blatant forms. So for example, what will happen to a young pregnant woman who is single, standing at the crossroads of a minority religion, minority caste, comes from a poor background, doesn't speak English or any other dominant language, and with a disability? How will each of these vulnerable positions affect her in accessing healthcare or a job or housing post-COVID in a country like ours? This and more are very challenging situations in our country. All of you have probably heard many of these stories, like in Karnataka, a very young pregnant woman who walked back all the way to Bellary lost her life. So we have hundreds of such stories. To understand some of these issues, we have with us today Manjula Pradeep. Manjula, thank you so much for agreeing to be part of this webinar. It's such a pleasure to have you here with us to unpack and learn so much more about vulnerability and intersectionality during such a pandemic. To introduce Manjula to all of you, Manjula Pradeep is a human rights activist working for the rights of the marginalized communities, in particular Dalits and women, for more than 2.5 decades in India. She has a master's in social work from MS University, Vadodara, and a bachelor's in law from Gujarat University. She is the former executive director of the Navsarjan Trust, Gujarat, in India. Manjula has represented issues of caste and gender-based violence and discrimination in United Nations and European Parliament for almost 15 years. She was the co-chair of the International Dalit Solidarity Network, and Manjula has taken up cases of extreme forms of violence and atrocities on women and Dalits in particular, the sexual violence on minor girls and women from marginalized communities. She undertook a state-level campaign between 2014 and 15, addressing these issues of violence against women in Gujarat. She is the recipient of the Women Peacemaker Award by the University of San Diego, USA. Around 2 years back, Manjula founded Wise Act of Youth Visioning and Engagement Foundation, which focuses on the rights and leadership of marginalized youth in India. Manjula is giving time as director of campaign, the Dalit Human Rights Defenders, which is covering 5 states of India. So thanks again, Manjula. And before I hand over the forum to Manjula, just as a format. So the webinar is for an hour, as most of you know. Manjula will speak for about 20 minutes or so, and then we'll open it for question and answers. If you want to ask a question, I would encourage you to type in the question, or we do have the option of, there is a button to raise your hand, but definitely keying in the question will be time saving. And please keep your microphone on mute unless you're talking, and also your cell phones on silent mode. Thank you so much. Over to you, Manjula.
Uh, First of all, thank you so much, Bhargavi, for giving me this opportunity to talk about the vulnerability, especially of marginalized women in the context of COVID-19. And I would just like to say to everybody that I'm going through a very emotional turmoil in terms of when I see and visualize what is happening across India, and also in particular Gujarat, where I come from, while helping women who are vulnerable, who are from different marginalized communities, and specifically from Dalits, Adivasis, and Muslim communities. As Bhargavi was sharing the topic of this speech today I have to make, I was just thinking about how do I visualize the issue of intersectionality vis-a-vis caste on one side. And as I was thinking about US, which has having the highest number of people who are suffering from COVID-19, I just remember my friend from New York, Professor Kimberly Crenshaw, and whom I met almost 15 years back. And she's the one who inspired me to understand how important it is to see a particular problem with a lens of intersectionality. When she came to Gujarat and she gave me the presentation of critical intersectionality, I started understanding how it is important to the Dalit, specifically because I come from the Dalit. So when I just started peeling off the intersectional lens vis-a-vis caste in India, I got some opportunities to meet her 4 or 5 times during this period. Recently, I was in New York last year, and we were discussing what's the changes which is happening in the context of India and also in the context of US. And then when I come back to India, I just realized that when I see intersectionality, I see the entire issue of caste and gender, which is intercaste, religion, class, sexual orientation, as Bhargavi was status, and the disability of that person, whether that woman is her marital status, the urban and the rural reality, and how does it affect a woman, particularly because we as a citizens of the country somehow, or the people who are working for the rights uh, of the poor or the marginalized, somehow we don't associate any problem with the intersectional. We are not able to understand the larger manifestation of a problem. So while I was traveling, I'm a traveler, so I do travel across the country. And before this COVID-19, I must say that when I was traveling in the states like or Bihar, even in Gujarat, I met those women whose husbands have migrated in search of livelihood to certain so-called developed state, right? I don't think any state is developed in that sense, but the entire norm of development is linked to how rapid the industrialization process is happening in that particular state, or what kind of development activities in terms of providing livelihood to people have started. So which means that a state like Bihar, which has the highest number of migrants at the moment, because I'm also part of a coordination group, and we are helping migrant workers across the country, and we are trying to help them. So we get helpline through the helpline. We also get young men, especially young men. All young men are calling us, because I do know that their wives or their mothers are in the same place where they come from, and large number of them are from Bihar. The highest number which we are helping the migrant workers are from Bihar. But what happens when a woman who is left behind in a house in a village, and she is very far from her husband or her son or her father? It really makes her life vulnerable. So there are instances where they become victims of sexual violence. I think sexual violence is a very big challenge. So that's something which bothers me. But when I'm just thinking about post-COVID, right? Now we are talking about what happens to a woman who comes from this marginalized status, which has a multiple forms of discrimination, but it also has a lens which makes her invisible, right? So how do we help her? Is there a provision in the system, or is there a mechanism to see whether this woman really is suffering? No, there is no provision. We say we are helping the poor. The state announce certain kind of packages, or the state announce lines and everything. Now these women, if you know that the literacy level is so low, they are less literate. Many of them have never been to schools. How will they access? How will they access these schemes, or how will they even speak to someone? So if there are no volunteers, if there are no activists, or if there are no social workers, their life is becoming miserable. Last week only, I was in terrible mental, when I was just thinking about these women and the poor, like, and how do they survive? How do the marginalized survive in this situation? When I think about Gujarat, and I think about 2002 post genocide, there's several thousands of women who are husbands, right? In Ahmedabad city, where we are working with these women who are widows, and when you see their face, and you see the hope which is still there on their face, in their eyes, that no, things will change for them. But we all know things are not going to change for them, because we all know that there is no desegregated data in the administration, in the system, where we can easily identify, okay, these are the women from the vulnerable sections, these are the ones who really need the support during a disaster. Now, this kind of disaster, which is due to a pandemic, is much more challenging and much more difficult than a disaster due to a cyclone, or due to floods, or something like that. But when there is a pandemic, where how do they survive? Where do they get food? How do they take care of the children? It really bothers me. How do a single mother, right? How will she take care of her family? There are no provisions at the moment to really look into the nitty-gritties and to see, okay, now these are the women who need the emergent support. They're lactating mothers, they're pregnant mothers, right? They are from the vulnerable communities. Nobody is talking about tribal communities. Now the tribal community must be suffering the most, because when they migrate, even in Gujarat, they're living in the open spaces. They're construction workers. They work on the open farms. There is no provision for housing for them. You all know what is happening in India, how people are moving back on the road, they're dying. And then we are just thinking about the safety of oneself. I think that is what something is bothering me. So what I visualized was, okay, when somebody wants support, how do that person reach to a proper mechanism where that person gets that support, especially a woman? I don't have an answer, because even there is a wide gap, there's a huge gap even amongst activists to really understand the pain and plight of women from the marginalized communities. The vulnerability of these women is something which is not being discussed, which is not being really thought about, even in our programs, in our activities, and somehow these women are left out. So how do we work with them? How do we ensure that these women get ration kits? They get food. I think something that is what is bothering me. I'm trying my best, and I'm trying to do it in Ahmedabad directly through my team members. But then there is a huge response which one needs it. And the point is, how do we reach out to them? How do we reach out to these women who might not do do not want to come out from their homes, and they don't even want to reveal that they're hungry. They're people who are being forced to beg. They have to stand with a vessel in their hand, and they are given food. That is not what is humanity. I don't think so. Humanity is in that context. And how many people will reach to this place? These people who have been discriminated based on the caste, based on the gender, and based on the religious identity. Not many people who would like to. There are not many who would like to help a Dalit woman or Dalit family. So, but then how do they survive? Where do people get that kind of information? So it's not like just providing ration kit or the basic need at the moment. The immediate response is that, but that is not going to address a larger problem. The lockdown is not only for 21 days. It might go on and on, right? We all know that we might have to spend few months uh, behind our doors. We can't even go out. But the point is, how will these people survive? There are a lot of starvation deaths going to happen and are happening. There are people who are eating grass. They are making chapatis from the grass, and these are the tribal people. How do we address to those issues? How do we address the entire need of health at this point when there is no proper functioning of the medical centers? The primary health centers are not efficiently functional even before the COVID-19. The state has not created that kind of provisions. The government has not created that kind of mechanism, and they have not even spent enough budget. And if you see even the localities where these people live, the localities don't even have proper roads, no sanitation, no water, no electricity. How will they survive? Summer is starting. We are saying wash your hands for 20 seconds, right, with a soap. Then we are talking about saying that you use a sanitizer. Where will they get? Where is the water? As the temperature will go up, where will they get water? These are the women, they go and fetch water. They go walk for several kilometers to get water. And how will they go? They're locked down. Now, who will take responsibility of these people if they I think I'm really I think we need to think about this. I think there is no way where we are able to take a step towards looking into how do we help and support these people. Are there mechanisms? Are there way we can just think about how do we support them without having doubts in our mind, without saying that, oh, they come from this community, they are untouchables, they are Muslims, they are somewhere, they are jihadis. And now the way what happened in Nizamuddin, we all know what's going to happen now. And there are people who are now discriminating against Muslims. They are not even providing them relief support. They are saying that Muslims are the ones who are spreading COVID-19. Now, what will happen to the women in these communities? I think we have a larger question to think about. I'm just thinking about the rural, very interior places where I'm working, like Chota Udaipur, and those kind of tribal districts where there's no water facility. We have filed a petition in the High Court. The government is not giving any answer. What will happen to them? So I think this is something. These are the larger issues which I want to raise to all of you. Is that time has come to just really look into this entire issue of vulnerability and also looking at the intersection. I think we have enough resources, we have enough manpower, we have everything, but the distribution of these resources is a major issue and a major challenge. We all have to understand, and we have to realize that how do we help somebody who really is poor, and poor is not just somebody becomes poor is not just because that person is a poor. No, you have to look into that. The poverty again is linked to that person's subcaste, gender, class, religion, everything which I shared with you when I started my talk. I think we have to look into those aspects. What else I can say is that I do come to know that there have been few instances of rape of women from this community even after COVID-19, and that is something which bothers us. I just was thinking when I'm making this presentation, I just remember that there were times like maybe 2001 post earthquake in Gujarat, and I do remember there was a village where I went, and that village there was shortage of water. Was this scarcity that's in northern part of Gujarat, and when I was meeting the family, and the entire aspect which came out was that husbands were not there, and they were telling us that, and the men were not there in the families, in the houses, and I don't. I don't want to say that men are there to protect women. We all know that there is high extent of domestic violence is happening now. But the only point was that there was some kind of mechanism to support these women. So when these women were there and they was talking to us, and I could see that many of them couldn't say that they are being sexually abused by the landlords in that village just because the power which rules the entire society in terms of your identity from coming from a dominated caste or religion or something like that. And in the name of religion, war our country, I think there's high time that uh, we have to think on that how. Sorry, hello.
Hello. Uh, Manjula, you can
Wait,
take another
yeah, I think
two,
I was
three
my.
minutes and
Just
yeah,
let me know if my time is over.
yeah,
Yeah, I
another 2, 3 minutes and
just
then we
want to
can,
finish it also. Yeah.
yeah.
So, okay. So I just want to end with this talk, and just by saying that I think much needs to be done, and how to do further interventions and supporting affected vulnerable community post COVID-19. I think something which one needs to also look into it. It's not that the problem could be solved in uh, in a shorter period, but we still have to make few important steps. Thank you.
Thank you, Manjula, for that um, great introduction to what is happening on ground. Uh, Maybe you could also highlight a little bit about the legal provisions that are there in the country as such, that particularly cater to the vulnerable communities, to the minorities, and in that context, would there be some hope that the law can come to their rescue?
Unfortunately, there are very few laws which are there to protect the rights of the minorities or the marginalized communities. For Muslims, there is no protection. There is no legal protection for them. For Dalits and tribals, there is a Prevention of Atrocities Act, which provides them some kind of support in terms of if somebody discriminates against them or violates their rights. But at the moment, how is it going to operate? How do they go to the police stations? The police is doing some other work then. So I think we also have to look into whether the laws are going to really help the vulnerable at this moment. And just to let you know, specific laws for the protection of Dalit, Adivasi, or Muslim. So they are not seen as a special category or something, as a social group. They are put with men in the community. So in that sense, I don't think there's much to for them to get any kind of support from the system, especially protection.
Yeah, that is really very unfortunate. And I've also been thinking in the context of COVID, what will be in the context of COVID, what will happen to all
Yeah.
those women who come from the minority section, especially those who are, trying to access other forms of healthcare, not necessarily for COVID, but in the context of COVID, how the system will take this opportunity and again discriminate them, whether it be maternal health. Maybe you can also share something with respect to disrespect and abuse that happens in the labor room when it comes to class, caste, religion, and in the context of COVID, how that will get further intensified.
A woman from the community, whether she is a Dalit or a Muslim or a tribal, um, there was a study we also did was that where we identified that what form of discrimination which is practiced against them is the what do you call them? right? Or the ASHA workers, especially the rural areas, they go into the neighborhoods of these women, right? Who might be pregnant, or yeah. So there is a tendency of mistreating them, by not treating them, right? So there is a they don't even touch them. So, and then if you see, even if you go within the subcaste, amongst Dalits, there is a large section of people who are engaged in male. So within that, if you see a woman who comes from the sanitation workers, like the Valmiki, who does the cleaning of toilets or sweeping of street, and if you listen to this, they are forced to do this, like during COVID-19, they have to come to the place to clean the streets, and they have to do that, right? No protection. So there are so there are hazards around that also. Now, in a normal situation, they were working without gloves. There were no masks. They were not given water, soap, anything. And now, when there is COVID-19, and there are the municipality authorities, they have organized transport for these people so that they can bring them to the place where they have to clean these toilets, or even the streets or the roads or something. So I think this is something one needs to understand, that with the COVID-19, there is more possibility of these people, if they are not given proper safety measures and those things, they can suffer from from it. But there is no provision for their protection. I think there is something that one needs to think about. So there was a woman who comes near to our area, and she came to my house to get grains from me. And I was just thinking, I asked her, how did you pay? Because she is from the Valmiki community, and she was telling me that that she lives very far, but then the people, the well-off people, or wherever we live, the people need clean places, because there is people are afraid that they might get like there's a possibility that the pandemic get more worse.
Yeah, some of what you said I missed, and some of us missed it because the internet is not great. But we do have a question here, uh, which is about so Leo asks you a question. In the Indian context, should we factor in a breakdown of intersectional decision making in times of stress such as conflict and disaster, as then the distinctiveness of class, caste, religion, identities plays up in a protection of sorts in a clannish way.
Yes, Leo, in the Indian context, yes, we have to do the breakdown, because most of the time the breakdown is not done. So ultimately, who gets the most support are the ones who come from the dominant communities, who are rich, who are men, who are from majority religion. I think these things, who are from the urban areas, right? So all these things one need to understand, that there's a very important need to break down even during the disaster. And I think this is which is missing in our country, and that's why we have to raise the issue of caste discrimination, or the issue of communal disharmony or hatred at the larger level, at the international level, because our country doesn't have a proper mechanism. And if that mechanism was there, um, we would have a better mechanism even to address the present situation, where we can reach out to the most poor and underprivileged, or somebody who's most vulnerable, right?
In the context of how do we raise awareness, what would you suggest, Manjula? Do you think the media can play a better role in problematizing this intersectionality, um, problematizing how decisions are made? What do you think the media can do in this context?
I've been working very closely with media for like more than 2 decades, and I think initially, at one time during the 90s, I do know that the media was not very keen to visualize the issues of the marginalized communities, especially the mainstream media. And slowly, as you know, that how the technology is advancing and how we have electronic media, and we have so many different ways to raise our issue. We have social media, we have so many platforms to raise the issue of marginalized communities, especially with the lens of intersectionality. But I must say that still the media is not playing that role which it has to do. So, see, when the stories of discrimination or untouchability practices are shared to the media, and even if the media, it's not the entire media, but there are people within the media who are sensitive towards the marginalized communities, and there are very few who really want to raise the issue of marginalized women within that context.
Thank you. And in the context of addressing intersectionality, have there been petitions that have gone to court and where some relief has been sought uh, in any of our courts? Are there any cases that you would like to share? For example, the classic example Kimberly Crenshaw often gives is about how women did not get a job, one because of their gender, and the other reason was because they were African Americans in one of the cases that from where she starts her work on intersectionality, whereas white women had got a job in that motor company, while African American women were denied a job. So maybe in that context, are there any cases across India which have been taken up on issues of race, issues of caste and religion with respect to getting justice?
See, one has to see the context of US and India, and even the situation of the Black community and the situation of Dalits in India. I think there is similarity, but in terms of the education which the Black community could get,
Mm-hmm.
if you see in that context, and if you see India, we are far behind. Especially as I say, where I'm talking about Dalit communities. And if you think about Dalits and then you have tribals, also the situation is much worse. But when I compare with Dalits and the Black, I would say that the Black has one advantage is the of the language. There is one language in US. In India, we don't have one language, right? So there is a power of language. So in India, when you are from the marginalized community, when you are a Dalit, or when you are poor, you are a tribal or a Muslim, and if you are a woman, you have less opportunities even for education. So if you see the data of the government also, which shows that the level of literacy in the higher education, like the higher education, if you will see, there are very few women from these three communities who are pursuing like degrees, like in those sense.
Thank you. We have one more question. So Preeta is asking, do our public health system ever address this intersectionality issues?
No, the public health system. I have not seen any place where the public health system has addressed intersectionality. I think intersectionality again is something which is not even discussed, even in the colleges and educational institutions, and even the level of understanding amongst the systems, whether it is public health or any other system, is zero.
Thank you. I also see among participants Malathi and Indira Vijay. Malathi, would you like to say something, add something?
See, I was
Yes, yes.
looking at it that there's a lot of inequalities that we already discussed in other papers, I mean, in other seminar speakers, and also we know now. So I would like to ask Manjula how, in that situation, what would be the suggestions right now for policy or movements immediately now, what we should do now, and then to take care of these considerations, and also in the long term, because we do have problems with regard to health policy inequalities. We do have in terms of health infrastructure, but we also have right now with the COVID how these groups are not being looked into, like she mentioned at the beginning of expectant lactating mothers, and also in terms of various other services on reproductive health care. So in the short term, immediately, what about these people who will be missed out? So what sort of suggestions do we have for, immediate measures?
I think, let me tell you very frankly, we have already, it's not because of COVID-19, but we already had, through our reports and through our memorandums, through our petitions, we have already submitted a lot of recommendations, and in terms of policy level changes in looking at the health conditions of the vulnerable communities. I think everything has been done. It's there on the paper. So the problem is if I say that okay, these are the suggestions which I would say that we should. I think there is a need to, like, we are using kind of now, because we are on like, we cannot go out of our homes. The only way is to use the social media. So there only we can ask for people's suggestions, because there, and I can share with you the reports where we have put those kind of suggestions, whether it is on several issues, but focusing on the marginalized community. And then we can think about what kind of a pressure group which we can create on the system. And because we want the state authorities to really do what is needed during COVID-19, because NGOs, civil society, do not have so much of money and resources which the government have. Even like the World Bank has given the highest number, like the amount which is given to India, billion of dollars. And where is that money going? I think we need to see into that. That is there a budgeting being done in terms of providing health support to the people who are the most vulnerable. I think one is the health. The other is also water. I think the crucial aspect for us is also the drinking water and the other water for them to even and take care of themselves, so that they don't become uh, they cannot be, they won't don't become victims of, I won't say victim, but it is, they don't suffer from COVID-19. And if that happens, that will be a great disaster for India.
Thank you, Manjula. The internet on my end has been very patchy. So just to combine some questions that have come, one is about how to make people in remote areas, in Adivasi areas, fully aware of what COVID-19 is all about, and with respect to access to proper healthcare and so on. And combining with that question is another one. How can we influence policy? Is it through activism, research, implementation, or other ways? And yeah, so just to add something to what Manjula is going to say, in most places, like she already said, it's just on paper. Nothing is practiced. Many of the protocols are not adopted at all. In fact, the WHO protocols are not adopted in many of the hospitals. One, because they don't have time. Secondly, much of it is in English, and when it is translated to the staff there, it's all just a poster that hangs there, but not completely made aware, taught properly, not through workshops and things like that. So there is a huge gap. Yeah, so Manjula, maybe you can take that, and then one last comment from you, and then we can, because we have just another 3 minutes.
I think both the questions are very important. How do we make the people in the remote area know about COVID-19? I saw the posters which have been created by the Ministry of Family and Health Welfare. And I was just thinking about, will they be able to read the language? When you're talking about tribals, the level of literacy is so low, and the other part is the language. And so they have their own local language, they have their own dialects. The other ways they can work is through the panchayats. And so I think that the village council can play a very important role in terms of spreading awareness about COVID-19 and how they can protect themselves. And also there are very few organizations who really work in the interior areas. And at the moment, they can't even reach out to these people. So the only way is to make the small audios or video. I don't know what video. Use of radio also can be helpful. And the other way is of making small audios where they can talk about that. So the local volunteers in the tribal communities, they can be informed and they can create which are not difficult to make on the smartphones. And there are some few tribal leaders who can also do that, and that's how they have to inform the community. And with regard to influencing policies, COVID-19 has also given us a reflection on what kind of activism is needed now in India. And the other thing is what kind of research is needed, because majority of the research are not focused with the intersectional lenses. They're hardly focused on the vulnerable communities, and in particular the women in the vulnerable. I think so. We have opportunity now to, and that only can help us in influencing policy. But these research have to be done by known institutions, known educational institutions, universities, because if an NGO does a research, it's not given so much of credibility. But if a credible university or a college or an education institution it does it really means a lot, and it really influences the government policies, right? I think and the third part, which I already have raised, is the use of social media will really help. So we have to create a social media platform where we can share stories, and we can highlight what's happening there with regard to the vulnerable communities. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Manjula, for opening up this topic of vulnerability and intersectionality, which is not much spoken of in the Indian context. Probably there is a lot of research going on, but not much of it comes in the general media. So I think this has been a great talk for people to kind of understand a little bit more about intersectionality and understand these multiple vulnerabilities, which will probably leave out a lot of our women and a bunch of people from accessing good healthcare and a variety of other provisions. So there is one comment by Malathi which says that yes, research on intersectionality is a great suggestion, and audio on, and also audio messaging. Yeah, so I think we should all take on from here and come out with good ideas to talk more about these issues, problematize it, and raise awareness amongst our own circles. So thanks again. It was a wonderful session. Thank you, everybody.